We have a crossroads fight. At 185 pounds, we have Kelvin Gastelum coming in here on a 3-fight losing streak, set to take on Ian the Hurricane Heinisch, better known as Ian Bangkok Ready Heinisch. This is the Jorge Gurgel of MMA, if there ever was one, apart from Jorge Gurgel, really. You look at Ian Heinisch, and he was on a 2-fight losing streak before his last fight. Lost to Derek Brunson, back and forth war, and then Heinisch kind of fell off a cliff. And then in his next time out, he took on Omari Akhmedov. And listen, you can say anything you want about Omari Akhmedov, but the guy will stick on you like glue. His cardio is weird, and he's a great wrestler. And he was able to outlast Ian Heinisch. So Ian Heinisch gets outlasted in 2 fights. What does he do? Well, if my cardio is not the greatest, and if it's starting to fall off a cliff, I'm going to become a 1-round Muay Thai fighter. So he goes over to Thailand. He trains extensively over there at Tiger Muay Thai. He comes back over to the States. He fights Gerald Meerschaert. And I don't care what you say about Gerald Meerschaert. The guy is tricky. I mean, if you're Khamzat Chimaev, he's not so tricky. But if you're Ian Heinisch, he is. And what does Heinisch do? Starts punishing that leg. Starts just whipping at it. And then all of a sudden just cracks him and knocks him out. Like, gets on top of him. He's hammering away. But it was that one shot that dropped him to get on top of him and to finish him. Ian Heinisch looked amazing in his last fight. For Kelvin Gastelum, did not look amazing in his last fight. And listen, it's been a weird 6 fights. Because I normally go back and I say, okay, well, last 5, and then it depends on, the level of competition. It depends on the time between fights. But if you look at Kelvin Gastelum in his last 6, let's go back to the Weidman fight. He loses that one in a main event. It's on Long Island against Chris Weidman, the hometown guy. And he gets submitted by arm triangle choke. And that was even a weird spot for Chris Weidman in that fight.
If we call Ian Heinisch and Derek Brunson a back-and-forth war, I think we'd have to give that fight the same respect. Because in the way that Ian Heinisch and Derek Brunson was a back-and-forth war, so was Kelvin Gastelum and Chris Weidman.
It was back and forth, and then Chris Weidman finishes him. So, what do we do with Kelvin Gastelum? Well, we throw him out there a little bit later. He's supposed to take on Anderson Silva in a main event over in China. Silva's out, so Bisping gets finished by GSP, and then a couple weeks later, we get Bisping to Kelvin Gastelum. And predictably, he finishes him in the first round, Gastelum does. So then Gastelum fights Jacare Souza in 2018. And this is a while later. It was a really good fight. Again, it's a split decision. You could call it for whoever guy. I
recently rewatched it. Now, here's the thing. I long said Jacare won that fight, and I got to be honest, I do think Kelvin Gastelum won it.
It was a close fight.
It really was.
We can say that. It was a really close fight. So Gastelum wins it. Then he takes on Israel Adesanya in one of the best fights you're ever going to see for the interim middleweight championship. Adesanya wins that fight. We considered it one of the better, the best performance in a loss. We had a video out here recently. But we had a video out here recently, Perry Encounter, where it was one of the best fights or best performances in a loss for Gastelum. Now, he does get dropped a few times in that one, but it's still a good performance. He loses a split decision to Darren Till.
Awful fight.
Yeah, it wasn't a great fight. Both guys were really tentative. Again, you can make an argument. I thought Till won that fight. And then he goes out, he takes a long time off, almost a year, and he takes on Jack Hermanson. And it's like, all right, what Kelvin Gastelum are we going to get? Well, we got a Kelvin Gastelum that looked really flat in that fight.
We did. Now, okay, you're way too hard on Kelvin Gastelum for this fight. Jack Hermanson's one of the best grapplers in the UFC, and I understand Marvin Vettori beat him, but Marvin Vettori never had to grapple with Jack Hermanson. He was the one with the wrestling defense. Yes, I don't think it was a good idea for Kelvin Gastelum to grapple with Jack Hermanson, but if you get submitted by him in the first round, that's just going to happen sometimes. He is that level of a grappler. So for me, I just look at stylistically who has Kelvin Gastelum fought who are similar to Ian Heinisch. And really, there's more than you would think, but no one is really a direct counter to Ian Heinisch, because for Heinisch, we have seen a few different versions of him, and it will be interesting to see, because personally, if he does come out and fights like he did against against Meerschaert, that's probably not the best version to fight Kelvin Gastelum, because if you are going to go out there and just primarily try to strike at range with Kelvin Gastelum, he is going to light you on fire, and I feel very comfortable saying that. I do think the leg kick of Heinisch will give Gastelum issues, but here's the thing you have to remember. Gastelum is a southpaw, so if Ian Heinisch is going to land leg kicks, he's going to have to use his left leg, and from a primary orthodox fighter, it's going to be hard for him to wrap that shin around to the calf of Gastelum. I'm not saying he can't do it by any means, but it's just something that you will have to watch out for, because if he is setting it up as the fight progresses, we had seen, for instance, Conor McGregor talked about it, when Poirier did throw one calf kick with his right leg and not his left leg, McGregor was able to see that, so just something to look out for if you're Gastelum. But I do think as the boxing combinations and just really the exchanges between these two, do start to get longer as the fight goes on. Because for Heinisch, if he goes out here and wrestles, I'd really like him against Gastelum. I do think he'd be keeping his head out of danger the more he does wrestle Gastelum. Because listen, for Gastelum, the peaks and valleys of his career, and trust me, there have been many of them. When you do stand at range with him and try to strike, you're going to get hit. He does have some of the better hand speed in the UFC, and that's the big talking point with Kelvin Gastelum. You can talk about the power, you can talk about the boxing, but his hand speed is absolutely insane. And when he is really letting his hands flow, and I know the opponent who I'm going to bring up, a lot of people are going to give me a hard time, what he did to Tim Kennedy should be absolutely illegal. And Tim Kennedy... This is one of those, hey, I know who Joe Rogan's favorite fighter is going into this, because he's like, oh, Tim Kennedy, like, he's going to want to make Kelvin Gastelum pay for missing weight in the past, and he's the most disciplined guy ever. Kelvin Gastelum said that's cool and all, and he just really used his boxing and his footwork really well in that fight. And if you are looking for a fighter from the past, you could sort of compare with an Ian Heinisch. Tim Kennedy's not a bad pick. I'll admit Ian Heinisch is a better striker, but their grappling is similar, and I would say that their cardio is kind of similar as well, where they're going to be really good for that first round, but as the fight progresses, you will be able to wear on them. Kelvin Gastelum's never had a cardio issue throughout his career, be that 2 rounds or 5, or 3 rounds or 5 rounds. I even go back and look at the Neil Magny fight, where yes, Neil Magny won that fight by split decision, but in the 4th round, Kelvin Gastelum drops Magny twice, and he does start to get better as the fight progresses. So cardio's never been something that's an issue for me when I think about Kelvin Gastelum, be that 3 or 5 rounds, where with Heinisch, when I start to worry about your cardio in a 3-round atmosphere, it does make me worry when you fight the elite of your division. Now, he might not have that issue with Gastelum, he might go out there, out wrestle him and ground and pound him, and I look like an idiot. But it does worry me when you do get tired against a guy like Omari Akhmedov. What someone like Kelvin Gastelum, if he is able to defend the takedowns, what he'll be able to look like in that 3rd round against you.
Omari Akhmedov tires a lot of people. But if we look at this fight, again, the things that you have to like about Ian Heinisch, I'm going to counter your point. When he fought Gerald Meerschaert, that was against the southpaw, and that's exactly where he had success, was kicking that lead leg. Against a guy like Gastelum, he's a way better striker than Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald Meerschaert's bread and butter is his grappling. He's one of the higher ups at Rufus Sport with that in his back pocket.
It is always wild that he's one of the coaches there.
Yeah, it's really weird. But if you look at Ian Heinisch, again, he has that wrestling pedigree from before he came into MMA. He got into MMA late as well. And you look at their ages, I mean, Ian Heinisch is older than Kelvin Gastelum, which might be a little bit of a surprise. Gastelum's been around the block for such a long time with the promotion, coming in way back in what? The Ultimate Fighter season 17 back in 2013, able to pick up a win over Uriah Hall to win the tournament championship. Then he was able to get a number of good wins. Jake Ellenberger, a statement finish win. Losses to Woodley, lost to Magny, lost to Weidman. And then the wins are really big up until this 3-fight skid. So you'd have to think, even if Gastelum loses this fight, I think they still keep a guy like this around. So. But man, it's really hard to get a read. And again, I will admit, I'm pretty down on Gastelum for the loss against Hermanson, because it seems sloppy. Like, it just seemed like, okay, we've had so much out of Gastelum, in the Bisping fight, in the Jacare fight, even in the loss to Adesanya. And then he looks trigger shy against Till. And then he just doesn't look great. He just looked flat against Hermanson, and I get it. Jack Hermanson is a very, very good grappler. He's a really sneaky striker, and maybe Kelvin Gastelum didn't expect a fight like that so early on from Hermanson. Maybe he was going to kind of enter into the grappling exchanges with some more striking to try and draw out Kelvin Gastelum, but he went in there quick and he got the finish. So for me, I like Heinisch, the fact that he's coming in from that orthodox stance. Now, the weird thing is, just due to the way that the world is, he's not over in Thailand training. He's out of, I want to say Generation MMA Striking, Genesis MMA. So in Colorado, he's no longer with Factory X with Mark Montoya. So we'll see how all of that plays out. But again, he did look really good in that fight against Meerschaert. If you don't like the loss to Akhmedov and Brunson, well, I'll tell you this. Omari Akhmedov is a totally different fighter than Kelvin Gastelum. All Omari does is wrestle. Derek Brunson, good wrestler in his back pocket. He's gotten back to more wrestling, since he's kind of been finished a few times.
Boxing-oriented southpaw, though.
Yeah, and the striking that you get out of Derek Brunson. Like you said, boxing-oriented southpaw, but it's more power over volume, which you normally get out of a guy like Gastelum. But let's back it up, and I'll give Gastelum some praise. And I haven't done this in a while. What's Kelvin Gastelum really good at? Boxing in the pocket and exchanging really far in tight. And his defensive grappling isn't terrible. We talked about it early on. I think Brian Kelleher was the guy that I said this about. But 63% takedown defense. If you're above 60% with a big sample size, I like it. So I'll give that to Kelvin Gastelum. And maybe his last fight was a one-off fluke. I like Heinisch in a 3-round fight. I like his Jorge Gurgel stance. And if he comes out here early and really starts to crack, I like it. I like the high-level wrestling. And we've seen it out of Heinisch when he took on, some primary grapplers. The Granby rolls. I remember going back to the Carlos Jr. fight. Maybe you're not high on him because he just got cut. But there's a lot of reasons in this fight that I like Heinisch. And yeah, that's who I'm going with.
So last point for me to defend Kelvin Gastelum. I agree with everything you said, but one of your points does kind of help me. Ian Heinisch, with his Muay Thai stance, does tend to stand in the pocket. And like you had said, that's where Kelvin Gastelum finds his most success. When you do start to take that Thai approach, yes, bouncing that front leg is great and all, but you can't really move. You are a stationary target, and he does have good power, but Ian Heinisch is weird, because I look at him kind of like I look at Brad Tavares, where you're like, okay, if he hits something, they probably fall down. But in all honesty, it's not like Ian Heinisch is this dangerous power puncher. I understand he stopped Mearshart, but the story of his UFC career isn't, wow, look at what a dangerous finisher Ian Heinisch is. I like Kelvin Gastelum in this fight. I like his takedown defense, and if this is a primary striking battle between these two, I do like Gastelum.
Matt, I'm really interested in this fight. So if we have a look at the odds on this one, Gastelum open to -190, now a -220 favorite. If we look at Ian Heinisch, open to +165, now +176 over on Best Fight Odds. The Tapology votes, 699 of them. 84% Gastelum, 66% by decision. So I'll be the outlier here. I'll take the underdog in Ian Heinisch. You're going with the favorite, Kelvin Gastelum. It should be a great fight. Oh, yeah. And it has major implications in this middleweight division that's ever evolving. So we're differing on the picks, but really looking forward to the fight. We got a great card headlined by that big-time main event. Kamaru Usman taking on Gilbert Burns finally for welterweight gold. So keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.